Welcome to the Laws of Business podcast. Here, we will share the skills you need to make your business a success. Learn about goal setting, productivity, time management, marketing, and much more. Hear inspiring stories with today's best business leaders and join a hub of thousands of passionate entrepreneurs across the world. And now, here's your host, Jamil Jama.
Hello there and welcome to the Law of Business podcast. I'm your host, Jamil Jama, and today our special guest is David Barnett. David Barnett is a small business author, consultant, and mentor who is an expert in the areas of buying, selling, financing, and planning small businesses. He's the author of Invest Local, Franchise Warnings, and his latest book, How to Sell My Own Business. It's a great pleasure to welcome David Barnett. How's it going, David?
Hey, Jamil. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Thanks for coming on the show, David. I appreciate it so much. I was going to interview you about financing, but I thought it would be better to interview you about buying and selling businesses.
Okay.
I think that might be because many people need to know how to sell their many people want to find out how to sell their own businesses.
Sure.
And
it's
as well.
Yeah. Do you want me to get a little bit into the backstory, or do you just want to talk about selling businesses?
Basically, your backstory will be awesome as well.
Yeah, okay. I've always been an entrepreneur. As a child growing up, I had all sorts of childhood businesses delivering, flyers and doing catalog sales where, I could earn a commission. And of course, being Canadian, growing up in Canada, cleaning driveways of snow is always a big thing especially for teenage boys to do in the wintertime to earn some money. And I eventually went to university. I decided that I would take a business degree because I thought it would help me become a businessman. And it took me about till the third year of university before I realized what they were really doing was turning me into a Fortune 500 bureaucrat, so to speak. Someone to be a middle manager in a big corporate organization. When I got out of school, I had a brief 7-year career doing advertising sales, and then I left to start my own businesses again. And started a business and sold it and got into finance brokerage. So for about 3 years, I would help small business people grow and expand their business or acquire businesses by brokering different financing options to them. A lot of leases for equipment, commercial mortgages, business loans from the banks, things like that. And eventually, when we had the financial crisis in 08, 09, a lot of the companies that I was sourcing capital from, these were alternative lenders, they ended up going out of business because they were selling paper on Wall Street and the market for that stuff dried up during the crisis. And I needed to pivot or make a change in what I was doing. And I always realized that business brokerage was something that was being done very poorly in my city. And I had seen so many deals as a finance broker that were put together poorly. I'll give you an example. I got a call once from a Main Street banker who said, "Dave, I've got this lovely couple. They just moved here from Korea. They have a deal written up on a house purchase contract saying they're going to buy a convenience store and they're going to get 95% financing within 10 days. And those are the kinds of terms that people buy homes under here, but it's impossible to buy a business like that. And so what was happening is people who owned businesses that wanted to sell them, they didn't know who to turn to, and the people who were trying to buy businesses didn't know, what kind of intermediary they needed to look for to get help. And so these people were trying to throw deals together without understanding how to structure the deal. And that's what led me to the world of business brokerage. And I joined an international franchise brand that does business brokerage around the world. And the reason why I chose them was because it gave me access to a training program. And I ended up spending a week in Ottawa, a week in Orlando, and a week in Atlanta doing training to earn a certification. And I became the first person in my area actually certified and trained in how to properly broker the purchase and sale of small businesses. Awesome. And over the course of 3 years, when I had my brokerage practice, I sold 36 companies for other people.
Wow, that was cool. 36 companies.
Yeah. And, everything ranging from beauty salons up to, commercial flooring contractors, driving schools, a bunch of restaurants, real everyday sort of what we call Main Street businesses that small business owners will own, and a lot of people in your audience, would patronize every day.
So if somebody wanted to sell their business, what are the steps they would need to take?
Well, last year I actually had a book come out. It's called How to Sell My Own Business. And the book seems like a book on how to do it yourself and avoid using the services of a business broker. But the reality is the first half of the book is actually why you might want to use a broker and how to choose the right one, because there's a huge problem in the business brokerage industry, or in the UK, I think they call it business transfer agents, or what they are referred to. There's big commissions available. And so it attracts a lot of people into the business who don't necessarily invest in getting the right training or expertise. And so some business people can actually have a lot of damage done to their business by going with the wrong kind of person. In the second half of the book, I teach people how to do it on their own. And that mirrors the business I have today. So for the past couple of years, I moved from the business brokerage model, where I charged people a commission for selling their businesses, and I moved to a consulting model, so closer to what a lawyer or an accountant would do. I operate from a menu of things that I do for people. And so for sellers, the very first thing that has to happen to sell a business is you have to do an evaluation and figure out exactly what it's worth. And what a business is worth has to do basically with two things. What is the cash flow coming from the business, and what will people pay to obtain that cash flow with respect to the risk associated with the industry?
Yes.
So, just to give you a quick example, if I had a restaurant earning $100,000 a year and a septic pumping business earning $100,000 a year, those two businesses produce the same cash flow, but the restaurant will sell for a lower price because there's far greater risks in the restaurant trade than there are in servicing septic systems in the countryside.
I've noticed some businesses sell when their businesses are going, when they're losing money, basically. So why should somebody buy a business that's losing money? Do they have some sort of idea that do they know something that a business owner doesn't know on how to grow the business or something?
Well, if there's no cash flow, if the business is losing money, then what you're looking at basically is a liquidation scenario. A lot of I've actually sold a few different restaurants that weren't making any money, and they'll go on what's called a development value. So if you think about a brand new commercial building, and there's basically empty spots and you can just see the bare walls in there, it's far cheaper to purchase a money-losing restaurant and redecorate and redesign it into your own style than it is to take one of those virgin commercial units and build a restaurant from scratch.
Okay.
Right? Because in the existing restaurant, you're at least going to be able to take advantage of plumbing, electrical, venting. Maybe if you don't even move sinks and things, you can really avoid a lot of expense. So even a money-losing restaurant will hold some value to someone who wants to redevelop it. But the owner is never going to walk away with what they put into it. If a business can't produce a positive cash flow, it's always going to be a liability. And buyers coming along know that because time is on the buyer's side. The longer you own a money-losing business, the more money you're going to lose. So you need to get rid of it. You need to get out of it quickly. And usually we're talking about personal guarantees and such on things like property leases. So people who decide it's time to go, they want to go fast.
So it benefits the person buying more than the person selling.
Oh yeah, certainly. Well, it benefits the person selling in that, maybe they get their name off of one of those leases and avoid having to, let's say, declare personal bankruptcy to get out of those liabilities.
Okay. And David, what are some of the biggest problems small businesses face?
In general, or just in selling?
In general.
The biggest, most common problems that I see over and over and over again are businesses where the owner is fooling themselves into thinking that they're doing better than they actually are. And what I mean by that is this. You run a business, and at the end of the day, there's a certain profit, and you take that profit and you think, this is what I've earned. In reality, what a business owner should be doing is they should be paying themselves a fair market salary for the industry that they're in. So a restaurateur should be recognizing the fact that their labor as a restaurant manager is worth a certain amount of money in the market. And then anything earned after that is actually the business's profit. I've had so many different people come in to see me over the years where they believe that they have a profitable business and the financial statements show that they have a profitable business. But when I do what's called a normalization, what I show them is that they've actually been subsidizing the business with free labor. And the question then becomes, who would like to pay money to step into that situation, right? And so when people are busy working in their business and they're not stepping back and examining the business from a critical point of view, an objective point of view of an investor's eye, let's say, they can often end up spending a lot of time and energy believing that they're getting somewhere where in reality they're not. And the most important thing that you have to focus on as a business owner is that the business must produce a cash flow in excess of what you would earn doing the job somewhere else. It's got to put money in your pocket. Otherwise, you either need to fix it or move on.
Definitely. But our franchise businesses, would you say they're easier to start than building your own brand and company?
Well, franchises, I think, have a certain value for people that are used to working within the confines of systems. So, someone who wishes to become a business owner who has worked in a large company, or they've been a civil servant, or maybe a person in the military, they're going to find it much more comfortable because the systems are going to be established, etc. Opening a new franchise, though, I believe isn't any less risky than starting your own business from scratch. You might be given the systems on what to do, but you still have to build a clientele who is already being served today by other businesses, right? And so if somebody really likes the franchise model, what I always advise them to do is go looking for existing open franchises that are for sale and purchase one of those. Because then you get the benefit not only of the systems and the brand, etc., but you also get the established clientele. You don't have to build that from scratch. And you get to see what the store's been doing in the past.
And your book, Franchise Warnings, is it? What's Franchise Warnings about, please?
Franchise Warnings, I wrote that one. It came out in 2015. And the impetus behind that one is someone spoke to me. They had read a book about how to choose the right franchise, and I started to talk with them about some of the things I had seen as a business broker, some of the awful things that can happen to franchisees, because you really are subjugating yourself. You're putting yourself in a position where someone has power over you in this franchise agreement, and not only are you agreeing to let someone have power over you, but you're paying hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for the privilege of being put under somebody else's orders, so to speak. And when I started explaining all these things to the person, they said, well, how come nobody's written about this? And I went onto Amazon, and there were literally hundreds of books about how to choose the right franchise, and hardly any talking about the dangers of the franchise business model. So I took it upon myself and I wrote the book, and it basically explains many of the different stories that I've had firsthand experience with. If we have time, I'll give you a quick one, Jamil.
Oh, that'll be great, please, David.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that franchisors decide to use franchising as a business model instead of growing like a chain, right? Because there's two different ways a business can grow. The corporation can open up new locations, or they can do the franchise model. The franchise model allows them to grow quickly because they don't have to come up with the capital for new locations. They get to use the capital of the franchisee. So right here in my hometown, there was a new restaurant concept that came into town. And a fella who had earned good money in the Middle East being an oil engineer, petroleum engineer, came back here with a bunch of money, built this location, cost him about $300,000 to build this restaurant in a rented location. And after about a year, he was so tired of losing money that he walked away from it. Now, in the franchise agreement, what it said is that if he walked away or didn't pay his rent, the franchisor had the ability to take over. So he owed money to the bank. They made a deal with the bank where the bank walked away with a small settlement on the balance owed. They went to the landlord. They made a new lease with him, so he was always kept current. And they basically got the store for probably 20 or 30% of what the original guy had invested. They then ran it with a manager for a few months while they found a new franchisee, and then they sold it to that person for a couple $100,000. right? That's the kind of thing that happens in the world of franchising, because basically the original franchisee, he invested that money. He didn't own the store ultimately. He didn't control it. He didn't control the real estate. There was a landlord, and he didn't even have direct authority with the landlord because of things put into his lease by the franchise company that gave them rights if he ever defaulted on the franchise agreement.
Okay, wow. So they don't really own the business then, do they? They're just an employee.
What I usually say to people is I say, when you buy a franchise, you don't own a business, you're renting one.
Okay, yeah.
And you get to use the business, you get to use the systems, the trade names, etc., to earn money for yourself. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you don't own those things. Second example that I was doing.
Like McDonald's, the people that franchise McDonald's, they don't own McDonald's.
That's right. They don't own that name. They don't own Big Mac as a thing that they can go and produce someplace else, right? It's all the property of McDonald's. There's another example, a pizza franchise. Some people borrowed money, they built the franchise, and over the course of the 10-year franchise agreement, they paid off their loan and they were making good money, and then they wanted to sell it. The problem is that the franchise company wouldn't renew the franchise agreement unless they updated the store to the current style, the more modern look, and that was going to cost $100,000. So the only way that they could sell their store was by making another big investment. And at the end of the day, they didn't want to do it. So they ended up walking away. And the franchise company got that store again for nothing.
So I take it somebody can't get investment if they want a franchise, can they?
What do you mean, borrow from the bank and things?
Borrow from the bank or an investment?
Yeah, well, people who buy a franchise, they usually can, because a lot of the banks have franchise programs, and a lot of them are predicated upon other things like small business guarantee programs that are available from different governments. So, for example, here in Canada, there's a program that allows people to borrow money against leasehold improvements. Leasehold improvements can't be removed from the real estate that they're in. So the only reason that the banks will ever come to the table is because of ultimately the backing of the taxpayer, right? Without that kind of arrangement, banks would only lend to the point maybe against collateral that could be removed, like machinery or equipment. Not all franchises are bad, and I put this into the book. So, for example,
which book? Franchise Warnings?
In the Franchise Warnings, yeah. So, for example, my own experience when I was a business broker, I owned a franchise, and the monthly licensing fee that I paid to the franchise company actually represented a great value to me, because I got so many different things insofar as CRM systems online and advertising platforms to put businesses for sale up on. I actually got a discount. If I were going to buy those things piecemeal, I would have ended up paying more every month than my licensing fee. So that was a great franchise arrangement for me. And there are great deals out there in the world of franchises. The purpose of the book is just to make people aware of what exactly they need to be looking at in the fine print.
There's a quote: "The world's biggest problems are the world's biggest opportunities." But some people, they don't have the money to start the business, basically. So how can somebody get investment? Because you wrote a book, Invest Local. How can somebody get investment?
I wrote Invest Local because of my experience as a finance broker. And while I was doing finance brokerage, I actually started using some of my own money to finance deals. And Invest Local teaches people how they can go about making wise investments in local small business and how to control risk and make sure that they don't end up losing if things don't go the way they're supposed to. And what was curious to me is that about a third of the people that reach out to me and send me emails after having read Invest Local are not actually investors. They're small business people looking for investment. And they read the book to try to learn how they can make their business attractive to people who want to make an investment. And basically it comes down to this. Investors are going to want to know, how much do you want? How much will I get back? And how do I know it's going to work? Yeah. Right? And if you don't have any money at all and you want to buy or start a business, then that's going to be a very difficult conversation to have with someone. I often say to people, if you're going to buy or start a business, it always starts with savings. Because if you cannot run your household in such a way that you can have a surplus and save money, then what credibility does that give you in the eyes of an investor trying to look at how you're going to run a business?
Yeah, because they're also investing in the person as well, right?
It all comes down to the person. It's there's two ways you can invest in a company. You can either be an equity investor where you own some of the shares, in which case you're taking the maximum risk and you only get paid ultimately if there's a profit. Or you can be a debt investor, meaning that you loan money to the company. And when you're a debt investor, you can either be secured or unsecured. You can have security over equipment or inventory, or you can simply make a loan and cross your fingers and hope that it gets paid back. So in those three different categories, you have three different kinds of investors. The person who's going to lend against equipment and machinery, they're probably the one that is the most lenient about who you are as a person, because ultimately if they've got their liens organized properly, they'll be able to seize the goods if you don't pay, right? But the unsecured and the equity investors, they're really your partner, and they have to know that you're going to perform and do as you say you're going to do for them to make that investment.
And David, what kind of businesses are you working on right now?
Well, I work with people. I help people buy and sell businesses. I work with people all around the world. I've got clients in the UK right now, all across the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. And I'm working on sandwich franchises, plumbing businesses, yoga studios, all kinds of different businesses that you can imagine, helping people either buy or sell.
So you're very diverse.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I guess my expertise is in the process. And where the reason why I've ended up working with people on helping them finance and manage businesses is because oftentimes when I speak with sellers, I've learned over the years that there are certain things that can be done to prepare a business for sale and make it more saleable. And those things that make a business more saleable also make a business more profitable and easier to manage. So I always say to people, when you own a business, you should always be making it ready to sell. For a couple of reasons. It'll be more profitable. It'll be easier for you to run. And you never know when you're going to have to put it on the market, because of the 5 big reasons why people sell businesses, only one of them is retirement. The other 4 are not planned for. Things like poor health, divorce, the need to relocate, etc.
That's awesome, David. 20 plus years experience, right?
Yeah.
David Barnett is definitely the person to contact for this. So David, if somebody wanted to contact you, how can they contact you?
Well, the easiest way to reach me is via my website, which is davidcbarnett.com. And from there, they've got, there are tabs that talk about my different books, my online courses that people can take. As well, I've got a YouTube channel with over 200 videos right now on buying, selling, financing, managing businesses, as well as owner issues like mastermind groups and things like that.
That's awesome, David. David, I want to thank you again so much for taking the time to do this interview.
No problem, Jamil. I had a great time. Thanks for inviting me on.
Everybody, that was David Barnett, and it was a real pleasure to speak with David Barnett. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Laws of Business podcast. Find out more about us on thelawsofbusiness.com. Thank you for being a part of our journey.